The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel as written to us by Matthew. At that time, Jesus said, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, and you have revealed them to the childlike. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by you, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son. So come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your soul. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. This is good news from the Lord. After last week's visit by Pope Francis, we hardly need to try to exemplify St. Francis, because we're living in a most amazing time where we have the Pope so exemplify the attitude, the virtues, the humility, the caring, the love, the compassion that so characterized St. Francis. And of course, this is our great feast day. As Franciscans, we gather and celebrate this man who changed our lives and who we realize still changes so many others. Perhaps you know or don't know, I only found out some years ago. I was visiting D.C. and went to the Library of Congress, was talking to the librarian there, and he told me when he found out I was a Franciscan, he said, do you want to know the longest single entry of any person who's ever lived on this planet? I said, no. Jesus? He said, no. Francis of Assisi. There's more biographies, studies, monographs in every language of the world because every religion loves him and the other Protestant denominations love him. He isn't just a Catholic saint. He's a universal man. And I think that's what we saw in Pope Francis last week. I had another friend from D.C. just call me yesterday and said never in his years working with politicians did he see anybody visit the city of Washington that literally changed people's lives. That's what we used to call a wonder worker or a miracle worker or a saint. As some have said, Pope Francis is quite simply a Christian, and it blows our minds. We're used to us clergy not necessarily being Christian, as strange as that might seem. I thought what I'd do, maybe, I hope this is appropriate. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Eager to Love, called The Alternative Way of Francis of Assisi. And I said, oh, I'll save myself a sermon. I'll just read my own writing. And the 13th chapter is called Francis, a Natural Spiritual Genius. Let me just read a few paragraphs. Human history is one giant wave of unearned grace. And you, the reader, another wave crashing onto the sands of time, edged forward by the many waves behind you. You are fully adopted sons and daughters in God's one eternal family. To accept such an objective truth is the only sense in which you need to be a Christian or a Franciscan. It is the best and the deepest meaning of how the risen Christ spreads his forgiving heart throughout all of history. It is not a role or an office or a group or a particular denomination that we are passing on. This is not the meaning of apostolic succession. It is love that we are passing on from age to age, and even, if you believe it, the very love of God. And there are some people who choose to trust that love to an extraordinary degree. Pope Francis and St. Francis are two amazing examples. Francis has passed this baton on to any who would receive it. He would not be honored or even interested in us pulling him out of his single place in this one eternal divine flow and making an exception or an idol of him. He himself only joined the great cloud of witnesses and is most honored by you now getting in line with everybody else, just as he did in his time. And not by wasting any time by trying to stand separate or superior or apart. This is the one love that will lead and carry you across when you die. If you are already at home with love in this world, you will be quite ready to move into the eternal home of love, which most of us call heaven. Death is not a changing of worlds, as most imagine, as much as it is the walls of this world infinitely expanding. If you get love here, you will get love there. If you have found the eternal home base, and you will then most easily and naturally live in that home forever. Life is never about being correct, and I think that's the freedom we find in both Francises. They're not concerned about being politically correct, as we say, following protocols and doing it right. They're just concerned about being instruments of love to whoever is right in front of them. So just stay connected. At all costs, stay connected. Our only holiness is by participation and surrendering to this one love, and not by any private performance principle. This is the joining of hands from generation to generation that can still change the world. These are the leaven, the salt, that share and pass on the life of God. Love is one, and this love is either shared and passed on, or it is not the great love at all. The one love is always eager to love. And in fact, such eagerness is precisely the giveaway that we are dealing with something divine and something eternal. Lenin, one of the supposed founders of communism, said shortly before he died, "If I would have just had 10 Francis of Assisi's, my revolution could have worked." He might have been right. Francis's revolution is still in process, and it cannot fail, because it is nothing more and nothing less than the certain unfolding of love itself, which, as Paul says, never fails.